Uh-oh.
Okay, we'll start with this. Poland's own unbeaten up-and-comer in the super bantamweight division, Laura Grzyb, took to her social media and simply stated, "I need 4 more." In the image shown here, you will see Laura holding her EBU title and her IBO title, none of which are part of the major 4. The WBC, the WBA, the WBO, and the IBF. Laura, she's been around for a bit, but has yet to challenge for a full title, and now she is ready. At least she thinks she is. Sporting a professional record of 11 wins with no losses, no draws, 3 knockouts. What title, what champion does she stand the best chance of beating?
Title she stand the best chance of winning.
Well, I don't think Laura beats Ellie Scotney, the United Kingdom's own Ellie Scotney, unified champion, holding both the IBF and the WBO titles. Currently, Ellie's on the hook to satisfy her mandatory challenger of New Zealand, Mia Motu. But if and when the time came for Ellie to fight, say, Laura Grzyb, I think she would beat her. I think she would outpoint her comprehensively. I think everything Laura can do, Ellie can do, but better. The only area where Ellie's ever been lacking is in the power department, but Laura's not a hard puncher either.
It's going to boil down to subtleties and little things, and I think Ellie Scotney's just got more of them, a tighter game overall, that she would beat Laura Grzyb. Nazarena Romero,
newly crowned WBA champion of Argentina. She's too ferocious, I think. Too strong for Laura Grzyb. If you haven't seen Laura in action, she's a finesse fighter, a mover, a boxer. If Laura Grzyb is, say, a scalpel, then Nazarena Romero is an axe. A blunt object. With Nazarena, a pressure fighter. What you see is what you get, and very few fighters in this division have the power, the raw punching power of Nazarena Romero. I think she would wear Laura Grzyb out. In her 11 fights, she's never seen someone as ferocious, as aggressive, and as strong, as persistent as a Nazarena Romero. I think Nazarena would win.
Jamie Mercado.
I would say that compared to the other two, the Jamie Mercado fight is the more winnable fight, more winnable, relatively speaking.
That doesn't even mean Laura wins. That just means she stands a better chance of winning against Jamie than the aforementioned two.
Jamie is the longest reigning champion at this weight. She was a champion before Ellie Scotney, a champion before Nazarena Romero. She's been WBC champion for a long time. Very successful and experienced. A lot more experienced than Laura Grzyb, battle-tested against hard punchers and top competitors, good boxers.
She's got more fights, more rounds in the bank against a better, far better quality of competition than anything that Laura Grzyb has seen so far.
It's a slightly more winnable fight than the others if you fix the circumstances. If you can draw Jamie Mercado out, say you do the fight in Poland, where Laura would have home field advantage,
and where the judges might appreciate Laura's finesse fighting more so than they would in Mexico.
Or the United States. I do think Jamie is slightly more beatable than the aforementioned two, but like I said, that's all relative. You want to talk about Laura Grzyb's best bet to win a title in what is a very deep and competitive division? It would have to be if somebody drops their belt. It would have to be if somebody moves up in weight, vacates their title.
That's her best bet.
That's her best bet, and to my knowledge, she hasn't even been fighting in eliminators via the WBC or the WBA, the WBO, or the IBF to fight for a major title. So she needs to get a move on that. Just getting in position to fight for a title.
I don't begrudge her ambition.
If she feels ready to fight for a title and she likes her chances, more power to her. But outwardly, if you want my opinion, she doesn't beat Ellie, she doesn't beat Nazarena, and you'd really have to fix the circumstances for her to beat Yemi.
She fought 2 times last year, and she only fought once this one, the Sarai Umpierrez fight last month.
There's actually a year in between the Stevie Levy fight that she had in October of last year and the one fight that she's had this one.
To get in position to fight for a title, she needs to fight in those eliminators, and to fight in those eliminators, somebody has to put the money up.
She needs to be more active in the coming year because she's not going to get a title shot just by posting about it on her social media and making random call-outs of champions that likely don't know who she is.
She needs to get to work.
Elsewhere in the world of boxing, it was made official earlier today that David Benavidez would in fact be facing David Morell early next year, February 1st, as a PBC on Amazon pay-per-view. The undercard fights, some of them were announced as well. Brandon Figueroa will be facing Stephen Fulton for the second time.
We knew about that one.
Jesus Ramos will be facing former champion Jason Rosario, and former champion Isaac Pitbull Cruz will be facing Angel Feirro. Angel Feirro, and not Rayo Valenzuela.
In a super lightweight contest.
I think that Isaac and Sean Gibbons wanted that second fight, wanted that rematch with Rayo Valenzuela, a chance to win the title back, but for Rayo, there was never anything in it. Why run it back with Isaac? What is that going to get you? What's in it for you?
Has he gone in another direction?
Well, he must have, because Isaac is facing Angel Feirro. And if Isaac is facing Angel, who is Rayo facing? When will Rayo be fighting? Rayo, the newly crowned WBA champion, I don't get the sense he's going to fight Alberto Puello, his fellow PBC stablemate and champion at 140 pounds, WBC champion, because Puello has a mandatory challenger to satisfy in Sandor Martin, so I don't think it's Puello.
For his WBC.
I know it's not going to be Liam Botto for Liam's IBF, because Liam is about to defend it against Richardson Hitchens before this year is out.
So I don't think it's Puello. I know it's not Liam. I doubt it's Teofimo.
WBO champion, he's in the process of trying to achieve free agency, break away from top rank. He's preoccupied with that.
Wouldn't be a bad idea, though.
Lopez versus Valenzuela? It wouldn't, because Teofimo doesn't have a mandatory to satisfy at this time. He is free to unify titles with another champion at the weight, but I've heard no news, no rumors, no rumblings about a Lopez versus Valenzuela fight.
Top Rank should throw some money at that.
Teofimo is one of the more well-known guys at 140 pounds, and Rayo Valenzuela, he might be able to bring some of those Mexican fight fans to the table to where that could be a decent-sized fight, a decent-sized event. But Teofimo is so uncooperative with Top Rank.
I don't know.
The bottom line is we haven't heard anything about that. That's just me. That's just me bouncing ideas around. So if he's not unifying with Puello, and he's not unifying with Liam, he's not unifying with Teofimo also.
Who else is there?
Well, there's Gervonta Davis, who's still at 135, but I don't think it's him, because the last we heard about Gervonta, he's still fighting Lamont Roach. He's still gonna fight him, it's just in March now.
But he's still fighting him. That's the last thing we heard.
So it ain't Puello, it's not Liam, it's not Teofimo, it probably isn't Gervonta.
Who's left?
Andy Hirioka. Andy Hirioka of Japan, who just so happens to be Rayo's mandatory challenger. I think that's flying a bit low on the radar to many of the American boxing fans, that Rayo, as a newly crowned champion, already has a mandatory in the queue. Maybe the reason he didn't fight Isaac is because he couldn't do so without forfeiting his belt. Andy wants his title shot. He called out Rayo after his last fight with Ishmael Barroso.
That's who he won mandatory status from. Remember that before that, Ishmael was the mandatory to the WBA title, but because Ishmael ain't got no money behind him, the fight never got ordered. Andy, on the other hand...
Andy does have money behind him, and the Japanese will pay to play to ensure that one of their boys gets their just due, gets their title shot. So maybe Rayo's next fight is going to be in Japan, in the land of the rising sun.
Is that better than an Isaac Cruz rematch?
Well, let's not kid ourselves here. If he would have fought Isaac again, it wouldn't have been a main event unto itself. They wouldn't have headlined their own show. It would have been an undercard fight. So how much money would Rayo have made fighting Isaac again on an undercard, where the fighters are basically being paid off the net? Immediately after they fought, I said, Rayo's got to be careful now. He's got to be careful with that Isaac Cruz rematch, because fighting the exact same fight that he fought on a Riyadh season show, if he fought it on a PBC show, he wouldn't get consideration. The judges would job him. The judges would rob him, because they'd rather Isaac have that belt than Rayo. There's not a lot in it for Rayo in fighting Isaac again. So for that,
Test the market.
you're a champion now, a defending champion. That's worth something. That gives you power at the negotiation table. That, all right, I'll fight Andy Hirioka, I'll fight him, and I'll fight him in his neck of the woods. But you've got to pay to play.
Just one example.
And one way that things might break down, there is another. There is the off chance that Rayo has jumped ship and he's going to sign to somebody else. Maybe to Matchroom, maybe to Top Rank.
He's bringing a belt to the table.
Could be good enough to get him a 2-3 fight deal at Matchroom or at Top Rank. He wasn't really a priority at the PBC.
He wasn't one of their A-listers.
If he goes back there with that belt, they're just going to try to take it from him. Whereas if he goes to Matchroom or if he goes to Top Rank, he can get himself a decent guarantee per fight in a 2-fight deal or a 3-fight deal.
Another way it could break down. Maybe he jumped ship and they just haven't announced it yet.
Eddie Hearn did hint that he's got a couple of signings, new signees, that he's going to announce in the coming weeks. Could Rayo Valenzuela be one among them? I mean, that's where Jaron Ennis went.
Subriel Matias.
So who's to say that Rayo Valenzuela hasn't decided to parlay his newfound champion status into a multi-fight agreement with another promoter? 2-3 fight deal that caps off with a unification match against, say, Teofimo at Top Rank, or maybe Liam Paro at Matchroom.
Who's to say?
Who's to say he doesn't land himself a slot on a Riyadh season show, maybe in February? Who's to say that that doesn't happen? There are a lot of ways this could break down, because at minimum we know he's not fighting Isaac again, and that might have been the smartest decision for him and his bank account. Now, as far as Isaac, if he wins, he can parlay a win over Angel Feirro into a rematch with Gervonta Davis, because I think that's always been the bottom line for the PBC.
You gotta look at the loss to Rayo as a hiccup. A hiccup for Isaac and a hiccup for the PBC, because that didn't happen under their banner. If it had, maybe Isaac would still have his belt.
Maybe if he still had his belt, he'd be defending it against Gervonta Davis. Maybe that would have been Gervonta Davis's next fight instead of Lamont Roach. They're really scraping the bottom of the barrel, putting Gervonta in there with Lamont Roach, a pro box fighter. So I figure, if Isaac Cruz can win this Angel Feirro fight, rebound and get back in a winner's bracket, he might go on to have a rematch with Gervonta afterwards, presumably at 135, since Isaac doesn't hold the belt at 140.
There's no reason for Gervonta to move up.
Isaac is going to have to move back down to 135 if that's the situation. He's got to take care of business against Angel Feirro on the undercard of David Benavidez versus David Morell. As far as the main event, I've said it before, I'll say it again. It's a good fight. It's a solid fight for the hardcores, but it's not so good a fight it should cost you $80.
So you've got the main event and 3 other fights they've confirmed. Is that the totality of the show? What other PBC fighters are going to be boxing on this card?
Or are you supposed to pay $80 for just 4 fights, which is substantially more money than what you'd pay to see a Riyadh season show? This costs more than Fury versus Usyk 2.
Let that sink in.
The main event. For a long time now, David Morell has vehemently called out David Benavidez. He's ready, he wants to fight him, and he's finally getting
Be careful what you wish for,
the fight he's demanded.
because you just might get it.
I've often said that David Morell has the right base style for David Benavidez. David Morell is a boxer-puncher. David Benavidez is a pressure fighter. But there's a caveat. David Benavidez is a lot more experienced in the paid ranks than David Morell. He's got a lot more fights, a lot more rounds in the bank against a better quality of competition than David Morell has seen.
That matters.
What's David Morell got? 11, 12 fights? That really ain't a lot of experience. Many would say that David Morell didn't look good in his last fight against Radavalle Kalajdzic, and he didn't. He didn't look that good, but I don't think David Benavidez looked good against Vajdic. I think a lot of people are being disingenuous about how he looked. I think a lot of people are lying to themselves and trying to lie to me and you.
David Benavidez looked like shit with Vajdic.
He even gassed out. Where normally David Benavidez is good for wearing out his opponent as the fight progresses, over time, into the later rounds, He's the one that got tired. He's the one that gassed out.
Against a 37-year-old Vajdik.
So let's just establish that neither David Morell or David Benavidez looked impressive in their last outings.
Neither of them did.
But it matters that David Benavidez is more experienced than David Morell in the paid ranks, that he's got a lot more fights, a lot more rounds in the bank. He's back with Memo Heredia, his strength and conditioning coach, and those infamous Memo shakes, that we could see a better, more well-conditioned David Benavidez in his next fight than we saw in the last one.
Memo wasn't with him for the last one.
I remember they had some kind of a falling out, Memo Heredia and David's father, Jose, and I remember that Memo talked about it.
On his Twitter.
It was probably over money. They likely felt that since David would be moving up in weight for the Vajdik fight, what does he need with a strength and conditioning coach?
It's more money out of pocket.
Your nutritionist, your strength and conditioning coach, paying these people all comes out of your fight purse. So they likely wanted to save a few bucks by not using Memo for the Vajdik fight.
You saw how he looked.
His physical condition, he was soft in the body, he had man boobs, man titties.
And he got tired.
Just nothing one of those infamous Memo shakes can't fix.
Shake.
So I'm expecting to see a better, more well-conditioned David Benavidez for his next fight than what we saw in the last one, in tandem with him being more experienced than David Morell. How does a fight play out where a guy's got the right base style for the job, but perhaps not the right level of experience?
What's that look like?
Moments of success here and there, but not sustained, not sustainable, that David Morell could give David Benavidez some problems.
He can win some rounds, but can he win the whole thing?
You saw what he looked like in his last fight. David Morell is not yet accustomed to having to work hard for the victory.
Dig deep.
Go to the well, call upon your energy reserves to finish strong. He didn't finish strong with Radavalle Kalajdzic, but then again, Radavalle fights a very different kind of fight than David Benavidez. With Radavalle, you have to chase him. With David,
he chases you.
And that matters too. That Radavalle made David Morell look bad, but David Benavidez don't fight nothing like Radavalle. I think David Benavidez will be the betting favorite with the sports books.
I think David Morell can give him some problems.
And I think the PBC is more invested in David Benavidez than David Morell.
They've got more riding on him.
They've already spent more time pushing and promoting David Benavidez than David Morell, who's more marketable.
I talked about that.
His whole Mexican monster persona, that's more marketable in the United States than, say, a Cuban fighter. Many Cuban fighters can you name off the top of your head that went on to become big attractions in America? Big marquee fighters. Not a lot, if any. Whereas David Benavidez, with his Mexican monster persona,
you can sell that to Chicanos and Pochos.
The Joe No Sabo kids in Arizona that don't speak a lick of Spanish.
Right.
And what all that encompasses is that David Morell might have the right base style for the job, and he could give David some problems, but he needs a knockout. Bottom line, he has to try to take this out of the judge's hands.
Because the PBC's more invested in David Benavidez.
You can't let it go to a decision.